Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man on. His name is Ken Valentine. He is a former Secret Service agent. His website is kennethvalentine.com. Ken, how are you? Good to meet you.
Joe, it's great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, my man. He's got a book out called Cheating Death. Three-time presidential Secret Service agent lives to tell you how. That's a scary, prescient title. I'm guessing you didn't write it since last Saturday. I'm guessing the book was out before then.
Well, that's right, Joe. It came out in April. Dan Bongino hooked me up with a publisher that decided to publish that. And we came up with that title because it was a term that we used among the agents on the president's detail to kind of poke at each other and remind each other of the seriousness of the mission and what happens when we don't do our mission very, very well. And so we would talk about how we took the president out, we brought him back, we cheated death, hand him off to the next team, and earn the right to do it again the next day.
Right. Who were you a Secret Service agent for? Who were the presidents?
Right. 24-year career. I was on the presidential protection detail. The last year of President Bill Clinton, the first four with President George W. Bush. In fact, the cover of the book is my last day, which was the inauguration. And then I was there for the first almost 5 years with President Obama as a supervisor.
Wow. Yeah, just personality-wise, one hears stories that Bill Clinton was great. Hillary, not so much. Did you have any dealings with her?
You know, I certainly was around her some, both before I got to the detail and then after. But most of my time on the president's detail, she was campaigning up in New York, so I didn't see her at the White House much.
Right.
And President Clinton was pretty quiet that last year of his presidency.
Not intended, but the book is very timely. Go and get it now, called Cheating Death. Three-time presidential Secret Service agent lives to tell you how. It is Ken Valentine. Go to kennethvalentine.com. All right, so you've got a unique perspective. If something's going on radio or television, I can usually see what's going on, and I can see things that other people don't see because it's what I've done for 35 years. As a Secret Service agent, now a former Secret Service agent, watching what went down Saturday, what are your initial thoughts when you saw it?
Well, very frustrated for one thing. I've never been in that position, never seen this kind of thing happen, except in the academy where we studied these things and we got shot at and had to react to them. But that's always plan B. Plan A is to prevent these things. And so we majored on plan A and the prevention. And I think that's where the Secret Service has to live. So the very fact that we see one of our protectees, someone that we've been given the mission and the privilege, the responsibility to protect, leave the stage, bleeding from a bullet wound, represents a certain kind of failure. And we've got a soup sandwich on our hands with respect to what happened there. Don't understand it, can't appreciate it, and we're going to figure that out. We got 4 investigations going on that are going to get all those details out. But I'll point out that Plan B, which is what the Secret Service also trains for,
Right.
Worked very well. They covered and they evacuated. They did it very fast. Meanwhile, our sniper team one shot neutralized that threat under stress. And so I'm pretty sure that represents the first time one of our snipers has ever pulled the trigger on another human being.
Wow. It is Ken Valentine. Go and get his book. It's called Cheating Death. It's out now. It came out in April. I've been in the company of President Trump interviewing him, but it was never at a rally. There was certainly Secret Service there, but I was at the White House, the most secure place on the planet. So we didn't have any fear of that happening. What is the setup? When you're with a president or a presidential candidate, I'm guessing you were on some of the campaigns. You said you were 5 years with Obama, so you had to go through his reelection at some point, I would guess. What is it like when you're at the rally? Does he wait to get the high sign from you? Does somebody, whoever's in charge, the field agent in charge for the Secret Service, Mr. President, you're safe, go ahead? I mean, how does that work?
You bet. Yeah, we always have veto power to say, nope, you can't go out on stage, or we can't arrive. The call goes out before we arrive at a site, and we're looking for that all clear. We have contingency plans if things are not clear, and then you always wait backstage for the introduction. And unless something's wrong, they're going to go out. But if something is wrong, if there's something not right, then you hold them back and say, give us a second. We're going to pause this and we're going to check this out and make it safe, ensure that it's safe before you go out.
Again, let's talk about exactly what we know. I'm not going to speculate at all. We know he was known at least an hour beforehand. Some reports say more than that. He had a rangefinder that you would only use in the golf course or if you were shooting a rifle. There is video of people, getting ready for the rally, and right behind them is this guy walking around looking at the stage behind some fence. We know that he's on top of a roof that the current director of the Secret Service says was too sloped. I used to paint roofs in Michigan. That roof wasn't very sloped at all. You could walk on that all day. In fact, the sniper was on there. The bad guy was on there, so it wasn't too sloped to have an agent there. And then we find out that inside that very building was a staging center for local police. Ken, what am I missing? They knew about this guy for a long time. At one point, the local cops said they lost track of him. One cop tries to get on the roof, and I guess the shooter turns his gun on him. Should anybody have ever given President Trump the okay to walk out, knowing all that we know?
I think, if we knew all of that ahead of time, then probably not. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
judgment call by the detail leader, whether or not to let him go out on that stage. I have to believe, and I'm going to back their play that they didn't know that was not communicated to them. I just find it, unconscionable to think that they would let him go out if that information was passed to them. And of
right,
course, they don't see all of that from the stage or behind the stage, but there's always a Secret Service command post on site, and it's a security room that's staffed not only by Secret Service but by all the law enforcement officials who are participating in the
right.
security event. And Secret Service, enjoys the good favor of great relationships, not only in Butler, Pennsylvania, but all across the United States and all over the world. And I think I went to 74 countries and did advances all over the world. And the very first thing that you do when you hit the ground, and no matter whether it's Butler or LA or somewhere in Tennessee or somewhere
Right.
in Uganda, you hit up local law enforcement for help because we're so small that we lean into that strength. We lean into the collaborative nature of what we do and get help. And it's
And,
part of
and,
the
and
joy
and
of
they
being a
know
Secret
the
Service.
area. It would make sense. They know that general
Yeah.
vicinity better than the Secret Service could, right?
But yeah, and so you collaborate, you work together, you get to know each other, you go out to eat. Some of the best friends that I have still were my local, state and local collaborators who I've stayed in touch with after working one of these advances. So the command post of the security room is the clearinghouse, and then we work on a counterpart system where one Secret Service agent goes out with one state or local law enforcement official, either a detective in plain clothes or most often it's in uniform, to go out and look for these kind of things, to
Right.
be in the area to respond to inquiries and threats and the public saying, hey, look at this, look at that. And that's what should have happened. And if they're seeing that should have been transferred by communication twice back
Yes.
to the security room, once by the local law enforcement officer and once by the Secret Service agent, so that they're getting a good picture of what's going on out there. They're getting it twice. They're looking at each other. They're talking to each other. And then that information is passed not only to the sniper team, to the counter assault team, but the detail protecting President Trump.
It is Ken Valentine, KennethValentine.com. Go and get his book. It's called Cheating Death. Three-time presidential Secret Service agent lives to tell you how. It's available now. Go and get it right now. It's going to be a great read. I'm looking forward to getting it. A couple of last things on what happened on Saturday. Then I want to get into some of your experiences as an agent. I know you've got some favorite times, maybe some more stressful times. And as time allows us, we'll get into that as well. One thing, the sniper who takes out the bad guy does a great job, obviously taking out the threat. But the question has to be, the guy's 140, 160 yards away, which is not a very hard shot with a rifle. And the Secret Service agent that takes him out, the sniper that takes him out, is above him. And he doesn't turn his gun much. Ken, is there any rules of engagement that we don't know about? Because it's been widely reported, and I think incorrectly, that he wasn't allowed to take the guy out before the guy's shot. Do you have to wait as a Secret Service agent to neutralize somebody until they actually do something? Or could he, had he seen him with a rifle, could he have stopped him before he did it?
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard those rumors too. In fact, my dad was showing me one on the internet this morning talking
Yeah,
about how, some email supposedly from one of the snipers saying, hey, we couldn't get authority to do this. Let me just state emphatically that is false. All Secret
good.
Service agents, officers, technicians have a green light to do what is needed to affect the security of our protectee. And so all they need to see and articulate is that their protectee or that crowd was in imminent danger and they would have taken that shot. So, with respect to the sniper, these are some of the most incredible people I've ever had the privilege of working with. They are incredibly talented and disciplined individuals. They won't take the shot until they have to, but they also won't take the shot if they're not certain. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what was the communication, what were they seeing, even what were they thinking, and that'll come out in the investigation. But they're going to have to be personally interviewed in order for all of that to come out.
Ken Valentine, former Secret Service agent. His book is called Cheating Death. Go and get it right now. Been out since April. One last question, as I said. Donald Trump, I stood next to him about an inch taller than I am, so he's 6'2", 6'2" and a half, something like that. We had some agents who the family has been lauding. They love these agents. They are his personal detail. They love each one of them, the women, the men, everybody. But in watching it, you've got some women that are 5'4", 5'6", that don't have the capability to put their bodies in front of his head when he's standing up. Is there anything to the size of the agent? Am I making this something out of nothing, or does that make sense? If you're going to guard somebody who is that tall, you should be able to block every angle, no?
Yeah, it'd be kind of nice to be able to do that, to select your team. I remember meeting a SEAL Team 6 over in Afghanistan after one of their successful missions, and those guys were all huge. I mean, I'm
Right.
6'2", and there wasn't none of them were any smaller than me. And so this is not the president's detail we're talking about. So it was a former President Trump detail, probably mixed in with some candidate nominee operations section agents. And
Right.
I think the height is an interesting question. It's one that we struggle with and have wrestled with. Ultimately, their job is to get him down under cover,
Right.
and so their height at that point is laying on the ground, and
Right.
so that it's not as big of a concern. But to your point, in a non-evasive action, they would have something in front of him if all of the agents were as tall or taller. Now, that's going to be tough to do when we get a president who is 6'6" or six
Right.
foot eight,
Right.
something like that. And so it's but that's a great question. I've had that question before already and probably handled it better. But it's an interesting question to consider, especially when you're under a situation where you were not expecting fire. And
Right.
but I'd much rather focus on the prevention. I'd rather
Yeah.
them not have to be tall enough to deflect a bullet. If that's where we are, then that's a bit of a terrible situation to
Well,
be in.
unfortunately, Ken, and this is just the fact, that's where we were Saturday. And the
You
fact
bet.
that they stood him up and he's there for 7 seconds, and God bless him with the iconic photo and the flag and the fist and the blood and all that, I get it. But had there been a second shooter, we're in trouble today. We might be having a different conversation. And that's why, listen, I think those women probably could kick my ass. I'm not suggesting that you have to be a man, but I would think you would want to guard the guy's head, and he was standing there for a while. Now, listen, I know Donald Trump. It's hard to tell him what to do. We found out yesterday, Ken, and you probably have heard of this as well. He literally wanted to finish the speech, even after getting shot. So, I mean, that's the kind of guy we're talking about, so I get it. But in that very moment, there were 7 seconds where he wasn't covered, where we saw his head clearly. Thank God there wasn't another shooter. Cheating Death is the name of the book. Three-time presidential Secret Service agent lives to tell you how. It's Ken Valentine. Do you have one favorite story? Was there one moment, one thing that you did, one trip that you made that made you go, wow, this is really kind of an awesome job? And it could be, one where you were fearful, but that's sort of what you're trained to do. Give us an anecdote if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, 74 countries, it's going to be hard to pick one, but I think, with three different presidents. But, one of the stories that I tell in the book, and the book was really designed to give advice to my kids, because I talk about my faith, I talk about identity and decision making and hardship and leadership and all these
Right.
things that I felt like my five kids needed to know. But I combine the advice with stories. So there are a lot of stories. Probably my favorite story, though, is 9/11, because I had the day of 9/11 off. It didn't end up being a day off, but
Right.
I had the day off and got called in that night. And the president and first lady were brought back to the White House. Everybody knows that. They insisted on being at the White House. But what a lot of people don't know is that late that night, we were alerted to another aircraft that was inbound for the White House. And
Oh, wow.
the skies were supposed to be clear. And so they were determined not to be clear. There was one aircraft and we were given the speed and the distance and the trajectory, and it was on a beeline for the White House, going very fast and not exactly high. So,
I have never
you
heard
know,
that.
we do quick calculations to figure out how much time do we have, and we had to make a very fast decision. We had a little over a minute. And so the decision was made by a good friend of mine named Jeff. He was the shift leader that night, that
Right.
of course we have to evacuate. Kind of an easy decision. And to go with that was the protocol at the time was that depending on where you were in the lineup, posted around the president and first lady at night, it would dictate that one person had to stay back and fight, and they were to cover the evacuation and then to be there to prepare and clear the arrival back, assuming they were coming back.
Right.
And that was me. So it was like duck, duck, goose, and I was the goose. So I had to cover the evacuation, which I did. You've got a machine gun, a pistol, a gas mask, and a radio. But all day long, we'd been watching airplanes crash into buildings. And so, what before might have been a thought about how you might survive this event turned into a realization that I was not going to survive this event. And so I had to deal with that. And I had about a minute to think about that, deal with that. And so I talk about that in the book. I talk about the peace that I had in that moment, realizing or thinking to myself that this is it. This is I am going to be a part of White House history as a marker for where I died. And it turned out to be an Air Force jet that was on its way to relieve the fighters up at Andrews.
Couldn't they tell somebody? I mean, you get on the radio. Let us know what's going on. My God, that's scary. I can't believe. So you literally said, I'm at peace. I'm going to die fighting for this country. And you were not happy to do it, but you were willing to do it, which is amazing to me.
Well, sure. We all sign up to do that, and that really wasn't a problem for me. I was duty bound and prepared. I think I was ready for eternity at that moment.
Yeah.
And that turns out the fighter jet came a lot closer to dying that night than me.
I'll
but
bet.
I certainly had time to reflect and to project and to be at peace in that moment.
Ken, amazing story, and I'd like to hear many more of them. Go and get his book right now. It's called Cheating Death. Three-time presidential Secret Service agent lives to tell you how. Do me a favor, come back on the program soon. We had to, of course, take up a lot of time about the assassination attempt, but I'd like to hear more of these stories, and hopefully you'll sell 1 million books, my man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir, so much.
All right, brother. We're back after this in the Joe Pag Show. Stay here.